listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, US President Donald Trump's bombshell claim that paracetamol use in pregnant women is linked to autism. President Trump even went further during today's extraordinary news conference, instructing parents to spread out their children's vaccines, saying, quote, "They pump so much stuff into these beautiful little babies, it's a disgrace." We explain exactly what evidence the US administration has to make these new statements and why leading medical authorities around the world, including here in Australia, are hitting back. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Tuesday, the 23rd of September. A 33-year-old senior police officer has been charged with the assault of former Greens candidate Hannah Thomas. Ms Thomas suffered a serious eye injury when authorities broke up the anti-Israel protest in Sydney in June. The police officer has now been charged with assault, occasioning actual bodily harm, and is set to face court next month. The male officer's employment status is also now under review. A man known as the Park Rapist, who terrorised women across Sydney's east, has pled guilty to a number of sexual assaults. Glenn Gary Cameron, 61, has been in custody since he was arrested last year after a breakthrough in forensic technology cracked the 30-year-old cold case. Police allege Cameron assaulted at least 8 women between 1991 and 1993 in Sydney's inner west and eastern suburbs. And Matilda's captain, Steph Catley, has finished 29th in her first Ballon d'Or nomination as her club Arsenal was crowned Women's Club of the Year. The defender was recognised after helping Arsenal to the UEFA Women's Champions League title in the 2024-25 season, joining 6 of her teammates on the shortlist. Catley becomes just the 3rd Australian woman to be nominated for the prestigious award since its introduction in 2018. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with the US President's bombshell announcement linking paracetamol use in pregnant women to autism in children. During the major news conference alongside prominent vaccine skeptic and Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Donald Trump also went further, warning parents to spread out their children's vaccines.
On the vaccines, they're pumping, it looks like they're pumping into a horse. I think it's very bad. It would be good instead of one visit where they pump the baby, load it up with stuff. You'll do it over a period of 4 times or 5 times.
The new statements have been slammed by top medical experts around the world, including here in Australia with the Therapeutic Goods Administration, who released a statement saying, quote, "It rejects claims regarding the use of paracetamol in pregnancy and the subsequent risk of development of ADHD or autism in children." Understandably, today's statements will cause concern for millions of women and would-be parents around the world. To explain today's developments and what the research shows is Professor David Trembath, Head of Autism Research at the Kids Research Institute, Australia. David, thanks so much for joining us. When you saw these statements from the US President today regarding what he is claiming is a link between paracetamol use in pregnant women and autism in children, what was your reaction to that?
I wasn't surprised, but I was nevertheless really concerned. This is a big claim. It has the potential to do a lot of harm, particularly given that it's not based in the science. And it goes to the heart of parents' concerns around how best to support their baby during pregnancy and following that.
We know that all medicine and medical advice should be based on clear evidence. In regards to, you're at the forefront of autism research in particular. Tell us what evidence there is over many years about any possible link between paracetamol use and autism in pregnant women.
Paracetamol, like a lot of other potential environmental factors, is something that we've been thinking about in the autism research field for many, many years. The community is looking for potential answers or explanations in relation to autism, and so this was naturally something that people would look at. What we see is when we look at the total body of evidence over, more than a decade, is a very clear and consistent picture that there is not a strong, clear association between paracetamol and autism. In fact, the majority of research points to no effect. And in the few studies where there is some small association, it is indeed negligible, very, very small. Certainly not the sort of evidence that we would have would cause us to lead us to any changes in recommendations.
What's the difference between association and link? Because it's really important to look at the clear evidence here, isn't it, David?
Yeah, certainly. So we'll often find in research an association between two things. In the case of autism, it might be between, something to do with the environment and a slight increase in the prevalence of autism or the number of children who go on to receive a diagnosis. But it doesn't mean causation, which is where one thing actually leads to the other. So a lot of the statements that are coming out around paracetamol and autism, setting aside the fact that the evidence suggests there's no strong link or no real link, people are confusing an association with causation, suggesting that one causes the other.
So in regards to these statements from the US president today, there has been a lot of analysis from leading medical experts both here and overseas. And rightfully so, a lot of medical experts have said, especially with pregnant women, that if they are taking paracetamol because of any type of fever, that fever untreated can actually be incredibly dangerous to the baby that they are carrying.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I'm not medically trained, but my clear understanding is that paracetamol plays a really important role in being an option for treatment and support for women during pregnancy when, for example, they are experiencing fevers. And so the idea that we would see a recommendation, a blanket recommendation to stop using paracetamol, a recommendation that's not based in the science, is really concerning. The announcement, it should not change the way that parents, pregnant women are approaching their health and care and well-being during pregnancy. If that's a real risk that an announcement like this has.
David, a lot of people are really concerned, especially regarding President Trump today going even further and advising parents to space out their vaccines that they give to children. You're at the forefront of autism research. What's your response to that? Because there's a clear association. He had the news conference with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who we know is a very, very prominent vaccine skeptic.
Yeah, look, the research around vaccines couldn't be clearer. So the hypothesis that autism is linked to vaccines, it goes back to 1998 to one study which was found to be fraudulent that proposed a link. Now, in the research community, when there's a possibility, when there's a possible way to better understand autism or any other condition, the research community is really interested in this. And so we saw a whole lot of effort going to studies looking at potential links between vaccines and autism in the hope that maybe it could help us understand and better support mums, parents, kids, and so forth. But time and time again, the evidence come back saying there is no link. But despite the really clear evidence, we're talking about studies involving over 1 million children over a period of time. Despite the evidence of no link, unfortunately, there are still some people who continue to promote or propagate what is essentially a myth.
So in regards to your research with autism, because I know these statements would cause huge anxiety and stress and concern for millions of women and parents-to-be and carers-to-be across the world, and even parents that have children at the moment living with autism, that they would in some sense try and blame themselves, which is wrong. But what would you say about all the research that shows about a possible causation with autism? Is there growing evidence that there is some form of genetic link?
Yeah, look, in terms of understanding autism, genetics plays the main role. Absolutely. In autism, we don't think about it as a disease or an accident or an event. It's part of who people are. It's an expression of the genetics that we all have and the variability. So when we think about autism, that's the lens through which we're looking. When it comes to the potential harm, I kind of have a personal and kind of a professional lens on this. Personally, I find it heartbreaking to think that all of these women pregnant and women raising autistic kids would have to take this on, this kind of questioning what they're doing and their decisions and the way they approach things on top of everything else that they're also managing this time. They're kind of exposed to more scrutiny than they should ever have to be. And this is kind of potentially adding to that. So personally, it really upsets me. Professionally, I get really frustrated. We have a scientific community that is completely geared towards providing helpful advice, practical advice, meaningful advice, and safe and effective and supports that are desirable to kids and families. And so when I see even sort of a dollar of research funding or an hour of research effort go into continuing to try to prosecute a case that has long been solved, it really frustrates me. We know where the priorities are. It's around supports for kids and families now in everyday life, rather than sort of campaigns that are all about fear and concern and ultimately blaming mums for doing the very best they can to support their own health, the health of their babies, and then their children growing up.
So, David, what would your message be to, as I mentioned before, millions of highly stressed, anxious parents? Because, you know, we've had a lot of institutions, medical experts, top medical experts from here and across the world slam these and refute these statements. But the bottom line is some of this may concern people saying, I don't know whether I'm doing the right thing. They would question themselves, understandably so. So what would your advice be?
I guess my advice is the same that I would offer to the community more broadly as I offer to my own family. And that is to trust the science and the system that's there to support you. So in Australia, we have a great health system. We have really well-trained, sensitive, compassionate, understanding health professionals who work with the best available evidence and offer really personalised, individualised, advice and approaches. It's right, it's appropriate, it's really important to trust these professionals and the advice. And when it comes to the science, it's very easy to think, okay, there's something that they've found out in the US that we haven't found out here in Australia, or there's new evidence emerging from Europe, and if only our researchers were across this. We work in very large collaborative networks. If there is a hint of anything that we think could better help parents and kids and families, we're absolutely putting all of our energy into it. So it's not like parents are missing out on something. They just haven't come across this information. Really trust the system in terms of health professionals and the really safe and sound and sensible advice they can provide. And please be confident in the research community that we genuinely are looking for all of the opportunities to better support kids and families. And we'll absolutely pursue any and all of those that come up. In the case of this announcement, though, it's really kind of going over old news and things that we've kind of put to bed in many cases. I think about the advice I was given, my wife was given, with our eldest daughter who's now 17. And when it came to, pregnancy and whatnot, it was to take a sensible, safe approach to things, have a balanced diet, to take medicines sort of only when needed, in the least dose possible, for the least duration, just really common sense advice. And that hasn't changed one bit over time.
We really appreciate you joining us for this really important story. Thank you so much, David.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
That was Professor David Trembath from the Kids Research Institute Australia. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. If you want to hear more about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., look out for our very first episode of The Beefing dropping tonight. I'm off for the next few weeks on a break. The Briefing's Helen Smith will be with you for the afternoon briefing until I return. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.